Whenever you rent or buy a video, you need to be sure that the film you choose is suitable for the audience at home.
Do sit down. We're just about to have some tea.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic, but scream! Scream for your lives!
Hey weirdos, the kettle's boiled. Welcome to Tea for Terror, where we take a favourite horror film and dissect it over a nice cuppa. I'm your host, Andrew Graves, and my guest today is making the best of what he has. Welcome, Ian Taylor.
Hi, mate. Nice to see you.
How's it going?
It's going very well indeed. I'm fending off the freezing cold weather, the snow, the ice, the mist. Just thinking about how much nicer it is to look at that on a TV screen watching a film than it is to actually live through it. But other than that, we're all good.
Well, I work for myself, so I spend a lot of time at home, which usually is all right, until the weather's like this when it's fucking freezing. Then I wish I could blag someone else's heating costs, to be honest. So, yeah, I think the heating's just about to come on. So you might see me visibly going from light blue to slightly faded pink, very shortly. Hopefully, as I thaw out live on screen. So it's good to have you on, mate. It's nice to see you.
Great to be here.
What have you been up to?
Well, gathering deadlines, it seems, to be honest, most of the time. As you'll know, I'm a teacher by main profession. I've got that very clever, sometimes you read about musicians, artists, actors, comedians. All of these people manage to be teachers and then move on to a brilliant, creative, professional career. I've managed to show that you can not do that. So all of the things, I've always wanted to do creatively, the writing or acting or DJing, I do all of that. I just don't get paid for it. But after the day job's finished for the day, it's look at that deadline that's just built up, and it's quite an interesting collection I've got. I've quite a few things in the pipeline for We Belong Dead. I've been really, really pleased with some of the stuff I've done recently, thanks to the connection with We Belong Dead. Opens up a lot of avenues, really. I've ended up posing for pretend fight pictures with the actress Neve McIntosh. I've actually voiced the model Pike that was going to be in the infamous film that never got made by Cliff Twenlow back in the day, and I sat nerding out with Mark Gatiss for a while over We Belong Dead's Chop Meat film about British 70s horror. So loving all that, and I can't help but feel that if I was getting paid for it might spoil it all.
Yeah, well, you got to pay the mortgage, you got to pay the bills, aren't you? So I don't know, I just kind of fanning around as a freelancer. So I kind of, as I always say, I'm always 3 months away from bankruptcy, but I've been like that for 20 years, so I find a way. The thing is, I ain't got any kids, so that's quite a big chunk of income I don't have to sort out. So I have a certain amount of freedom that maybe other people don't have, so I can fanny about a bit more. So I don't know. I'd make it up as I go along, Ian. That's what I do. And occasionally I get to do some nice stuff, which is always a bit odd. And imposter syndrome never goes away, so that's handy.
I think we all have. I think we all have that. Yeah. But it is, for all I was saying, it is nice to do the teaching and then keep slipping in cheeky references to films and that they should watch and books that they should read. It's nice to try and influence the future generation to make sure there's still a bit of classic horror love going on there and that sort of thing. So I make the most of that.
Well, I kind of still do teaching a bit. So I do bits and pieces of at Trent University in Nottingham.
All right.
So I teach, mate. It is kind of film related stuff, really, which is, never feels like work to me, And I
No,
also do loads of stuff at Broadway, but Broadway is kind of more vocational, sort of more film, again, film theory stuff. But I kind of get to do what I want, really. So it's nice.
yeah,
So yeah, but I do like teaching. I have to say, I'm not, and I think the moment I get to do it on my terms, so which is what I like. Whereas
yeah.
I have been in a position where I have taught full time. I won't mention the establishment I worked full time, but it was fucking dreadful. And nervous breakdown time, once a week, it was horrible. So I get it. Teaching is it's a hard fucking job.
Mm.
Anybody that's ever fucking criticized teachers and moaned about holidays, fuck you. It's fucking hard. It's really hard.
It is, but at least you feel like you're doing something useful or
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to do something useful. You know,
It kind of keeps you young, I think, and it kind of keeps your ego in check because you have to be fairly self-deprecating to be a teacher, I think.
you do. You need to have a sense of humour, a lot of it about yourself, and yeah, it, not that I want to use the phrase too often, but it is what it is. I'm not sure actually what the phrase means, but I think that probably sums up teaching for you. Anybody who doubts that it's difficult, just think about doing your job day to day, but every hour you get a new 30 people coming in trying to stop you doing it.
Yeah, yeah,
That,
exactly.
you know,
I remember a few years, well, quite a few, like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, there was this thing, I don't know if you remember it, there's this fucking awful thing on Channel 4 where like Jamie Oliver opened a school and he got all his fucking celeb mates in to teach and they were all fucking useless. And it was just like, I was
yeah.
sitting at home thinking, yeah, it's fucking hard, isn't it, mate?
I was I was fuming once. I've never forgiven her. Louise Minchin, the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
presenter.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And she was on the BBC Breakfast. This was years ago. And there must have been strikes going on in various professions at the time. And they were discussing it. And she was saying, well, okay, I can understand that that's a problem for the medical side of things, but surely teaching, as long as you got the lessons there, you can just get anybody to come in and teach them. Uh, Never forgiven her. I said, it's not me, this, but I did. It was the only time in my life I sent an angry email, which of course she ignored. Quite right, because I, I'd have been embarrassed if I got beaten in a fight with her. But, it's, yeah,
I
come and have a
know.
go. Come and have a go, Louise.
I always used to amuse. It's like the thing I used to get when I was like full-time teaching. It was always like, well, bloody training days, inset days. It's like, yeah, but you do understand. I'm not choosing to do those. It's part of my fucking contract. I don't want to
Yeah.
do them, but they are making me do them. I'd rather have the fucking kids
Yeah.
in. Fuck's sake.
And they must imagine we're, I don't know, having a picnic, playing a few games, going to the pub. No,
Well,
yeah.
listen. Welcome to Teachers Anonymous, folks. Talking of teaching, then, Ian.
Yeah.
When did you first welcome horror into your life?
I mean, funnily enough, I was young, but it was kind of complicated because I've got this um, imagination, which I suppose a lot of us who are involved in any of this stuff, of course, we do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing these creative things. I'm an only child as well, so I didn't have the support of anybody like sharing a room with me or anything. And if I watched stuff or read stuff when I was particularly young, it wasn't that I had nightmares. It wasn't that I believed any of the stuff that I was watching or reading, but I just had a great imagination and would lie there thinking, what if? What if the mummy was walking down my drive right now? And I loved it. I loved the feeling it gave me. But my mum and dad didn't love the amount of sleepless nights it gave them. So for years, I was just sort of picking at it. But I remember getting Dennis Gifford's Monsters of the Movies, that little book that think a lot of people my age got in their school book club around about 1977, and I got that, and I was absolutely fascinated with it, and but terrified by it. The photograph of Plague of the Zombies uh, at the back is Nate Z book. Do you know the book? Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
yeah,
my brother, I
yeah. It's a
didn't have
great
it. My,
book.
my my brother had it, but I,
Yeah,
very quickly pinched it, and it was
yeah,
just a really, for those that don't know, it
yeah,
was just a brilliant little. Because obviously everybody knows the Gifford Pictorial History of Horror book, but this one was, it was like a little sort of paperback, and you had like a really interesting sort of black and white image from a film, and then there'd be just be like a, what if I remember rightly, it's like a one page kind of synopsis of what was happening, and it was just,
yeah.
as a
It's
kid, that you couldn't access these films a lot of the time, so
yeah,
to get
yeah,
these tantalizing one page synopses, it was just like, I remember, I mean, I vividly remember reading the synopsis for The Fly and thinking, oh, fucking hell, I really need to
yeah.
see this film.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, you'd have been disappointed with The Fly because the picture in the book is from Return of the Fly.
It is, yeah,
It's,
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, it's the fly with a bigger head. But it was the zombie, Ben Harris from Plague of the Zombies, and the picture terrified me. I still think it's a terrifying picture. But I loved it. And then I thought, I can't face this for a while. So I asked my grandma, who was babysitting me at the time, can you just hide this somewhere for me, please? Because I love it. I don't want to get rid of it, but I don't want to see it for a bit. So I did that and then forgot about it. And then I suppose a few months later, I was trying to look for something. I don't know what. It must have been something that I wasn't supposed to find. And I got a chair in the kitchen and I stood up looking in the high cupboards. And then on the top of the high cupboards, I found that book. That's where my grandma had put it. And I got it down again and I'm reading away at them and immediately terrified by the zombie again and just got rid of the book. And then, of course, promptly rebought it from jumble sale. So I have still got it now. I loved it, but it's almost like what Bram Stoker was trying to do with Dracula, where you're attracted but repulsed by the vampire.
Mm.
And I was like that. And fair play to me dad. He took me. I mean, he's 91 this Sunday, bless him. Way back in the day, the first films he was taken to me to at the cinema were At the Earth's Core,
Yeah.
Star Wars, Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, Battlestar Galactica, the remake of King Kong, which I didn't see anything wrong with at the time. Still quite like it now. And bizarrely, must have been a re-release of the Giant Spider Invasion.
Ah.
There must have been a summer re-release. Watching that now, it's the most ridiculous thing, but it was pressing all the right buttons in the mid to late 70s for me, I guess. And I love Doctor Who as well. And I just love that little frisson, that more than just a good atmospheric story, but just the spookiness, the otherworldliness. And I've never lost that thinking life's a lot more interesting with that,
Yeah, well,
and
we
that was
must be a similar age because the films you mentioned there, going to see, at that age, yeah, they were all definitely. I certainly have vivid memories of going to see At the Earth's Core because I think I did.
mm,
It was one of it was kind of the first film I didn't see with my parents. My brother took me. I mean, my brother would only been about 12, but we
yeah,
went with my brother. I remember also, this ages me, but going in 10 minutes before the end and then
yeah,
waiting for for the film to
that's right,
start again. And
yeah,
I definitely went to see King Kong, the 76 version when that came out, and I was obsessed with it. I was a kid. And I
yeah,
remember all the merchandise. I remember the ice creams you used to get with the free masks and all that kind of
that's
stuff.
right,
And I'm certainly, Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. That would have been because obviously I'd seen the Harryhausen stuff on TV, but yeah, it was, we
yeah,
used to go to Skegness every year, and it was like we'd stay at this kind of Derbyshire miners kind of, because my dad was a miner, so we'd stay in these kind
yeah,
of chalets there, and there was a cinema on site, and yeah, definitely remember seeing Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger and being again obsessed with that, but also strangely as well with that cinema in Skegness, they'd also show stuff that I'm very much into now, but didn't quite understand at the time. I liked at the time, but they would
Yeah.
show loads of those kind of, Bud Spencer spaghetti comedy spaghetti
Oh
westerns
yeah,
as well. So
yeah,
I used to watch a load of those as well, and the kind of and then the sort of Fu Manchu films as well, which were the kind of rehashing. So
yeah.
yeah, all of that kind of stuff that really chimes in with me really. So yeah, those kind of memories.
And funnily enough, my dad started off working life down the pits as well. So it is kind of something that mine and fathers take the sons to, I guess, that kind of film. Must be. But um, we didn't have a video player and recorder particularly early, and my uncle did. And so whenever I went round to my cousin's house at a weekend, every now and again there'd be something taped from the night before, and that was where I was getting access to horror films that were on telly at the time. And I can vividly remember some of the ones from the time: House of Dracula, I Walk with a Zombie, um, that famous double bill that made the front of the Radio Times, The Ghoul, the Tyburn version, and Night of the Demon. Doctor Fives Rises Again, From Beyond the Grave, and Dance of the Vampires. And they really stuck me. And once on a sleepover, we were just, me and my cousin Lynn, we were trying to find any sort of horror sort of film. Our mums and dads were out. Their older brother was supposed to be looking after us, but he was upstairs, not paying any attention to what we were doing. And we found The Wicker Man, and sort of went into The Wicker Man with no knowledge of what it was about at all. And that, probably too young. And it was, it was a little bit of a mind blow for, when we got to the ending of that. But it just, when we got a video recorder, it was just, that was when the floodgates opened, really. And in particular, although I was late becoming an obsessive, I'd had this since I was about 7, where I knew I was really loving that stuff. But it wasn't until the BBC did that Christmas mini season of Hammer films, 1984. That was when I kind of, the balance tipped, and I became a full on obsessive, all things horror. First of all, classic, and then uh, more and more new stuff as well. And yeah, obsessive I remain, I guess.
I remember, I mean, obviously, as discussed on this podcast many times before, lots of people that come on have, very strong memories of the Saturday night BBC Two double bills. And I mean, obviously, you used to get stuff on like ITV as well and different ITV regions. But and I definitely watched. I stayed up. My mum and dad would let me stay up to watch those double bills. So I was really lucky. I loved all that
Yeah,
at the time. Um, but yeah, like yourself, I got really obsessed. I'd always been fascinated by it, but I got really obsessed like in my teens, and it was really to do one of the key things was Channel 4 in 86, I believe it was 86. They showed they showed loads. I think they started with like Cabinet Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, and they worked
yes.
all the way through the Universal, most of the Universal stuff, not all Universal, but a lot of the
No, there was
Universal
some other
stuff.
stuff. The
Yeah,
Vampire Bat was on as
yes,
well, I
yeah.
think. Stuff
And
like that.
but
Yeah,
they had like really strange, like towards the end, they would throw in like really odd stuff as well. So they'd be like that episode of the is it Route 66 with yeah, and all
yeah.
that kind of
That's
stuff. And
right. Lizards, whatever, and I can't remember what the title of the episode was now, but yeah, Karloff and Laurie and
yeah,
Cheney Duke, was it? Yeah,
but that was a massive
I
thing.
remember.
I think Channel 4, because everybody kind of talks about Channel 4 in the early 80s when they first started and how subversive it was and all that, blah, blah, blah. And
Mm.
yeah, there was some stuff, but there's a lot of shit on as well when it first started. But for me, I think Channel 4 came into its own the late 80s, early 90s. That's when they started to show like repeats of the Twilight Zone. They did
Yeah,
those late night double bills. They did, they were showing a lot of 50s kind of sitcoms like,
yeah. They
uh,
repeated
yeah, yeah.
the Avengers and the Prisoner.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All of that kind
Uh,
of stuff. And some really interesting documentaries and stuff as well, and comedy, and it all seemed to overlap. At the same time,
Yeah,
you had things like the Secret Cabaret. You also had, it's the beginning of like Vic and Bob doing this really fucking surreal stuff, and it just felt really mental. It felt like I was really coming into my own at that point. It's like this channel's for me, you know. As soon as it got past about 8:30 at night, stuff really
yeah,
came alive on Channel 4.
yeah. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they had a big Godzilla season as well, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah, they
And
showed all the Godzilla film. I mean, me and my mate,
and
I
loads of Chinese ghost
yeah,
story films as well.
yeah,
Brilliant.
because I never had a video when I was living with my dad. My dad just my dad struggled with a telephone, so there's no way he's gonna get a video. Um, so I didn't have a video till I kind of left home when I was about 25 or whatever.
Yeah,
I left home when I was 20, but then I got a video a few years later. But my mate had a video, so he used to tape everything and all that kind of stuff from around the same era. You get ITV, bizarrely would be showing like because a lot of this stuff was kind of copyright free or whatever, or free
yeah,
domain. You
yeah,
get things like Night of the Living Dead and Carnival of Souls. I remember seeing that for the first time on ITV, which seemed like really
yeah.
incongruous to be on ITV, but it was brilliant. Yeah. So I think what we'll introduce the film then we're going to look at today. So today, on this episode, we are going to look at Pearl from 2022, directed by Ty West.
Lord, make me the biggest star the world has ever known, so that I'll make it far, far away from this place.
Now, caring for your family during these times is admirable, but you only get one take at this life.
If only they would just die.
So, Ian, when was obviously, I kind of know what you're going to say because it's not been out that long, but when did you see this when it first came out? Did you see it straight away? Was it something you came to later on, or?
Well, it's a funny thing, really, with me that I'm not one of these people who sort of is always claiming that there are no good films anymore, and we should only watch all the old stuff. But at the same time, I've not found myself going to the cinema watching a lot of horror releases as they come out. And a lot of that, I think, is because I want to watch stuff without the hype. And I think it's just such a time now online, everything's hyped or everything's hated. And I can't be doing with any of that. So I think over the last few years, the last year and a bit, the only two films I've actually been to see at the cinema on release is Jekyll, the new sort of Hammer presented one, and Salem's Lot, the new version of that. I haven't seen a Ty West film at the cinema, and yet I think in recent times he's fast becoming one of my favourite directors. And it was when I got to see it free on TV. I just X first, and then Pearl, and that's how I did it. And confession to make, I've not actually watched Maxine yet. But I'd sooner wait, leave it a bit, make my own mind up, and not have to deal with the writing online that I watched that and enjoyed it, and then just get massacred by people I'm never going to meet.
Oh, fuck them. Give a fuck about. Would I be doing a podcast like this if I cared about them?
Absolutely.
I no, it's weird because I'm a big advocate of 21st century cinema, horror cinema. I think, the 21st century has got a lot wrong. Don't get me wrong, but
No,
I think one of the things it is clearly, punching above its weight is horror films. I think we've had a brilliant array of horror films right from the sort of turn of the sort of 21st century. You had that run of fantastic J horrors, and that led to Blair
yeah,
Witch and all this. So it's been
yeah,
constant. It's been brilliant stuff, I think, and I think more recently we've had excellent stuff as well. However, I have to say I do watch a lot of stuff at the cinema, and I try and grab as much as I can, but But the two examples you gave of being like the few ones you have seen at the cinema, Jekyll and Salem's Lot, I've not seen either of those. So
Right.
I will see them at some point. But it's just I think sometimes because there's the cinema I do a lot of work for, the Broadway. It's very much a kind of art house, kind of very independent, and they show mainstream films, but they also show a lot of independent stuff that you're not going to get to see anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I kind of refuse to go anywhere else, really. There are cinemas in the area, but I just refuse to go because it's a shit experience. It's more expensive. It's a shit
Yeah.
experience. And whereas you go to Broadway, I know everybody, and so I do limit myself to going to the Broadway, so if I can't get in that week, then like Starve Acre, for
Yeah.
instance, that came out, and I was in Wales at the time, middle of nowhere in Wales, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't see it. So I've only recently saw it on sort of Amazon when it came, well, like BFI player or whatever. So yeah, I do try and get to see stuff, but yeah, but I think like yourself, I have seen Maxine, but I sort of bizarrely I saw I saw X first, then
Yeah.
Maxine, and then went back to see Pearl. And Pearl, I love all three, and I think all three
Yeah.
have merits. But I think Pearl, for me, is by far the best of the three. Um, it's just an incredible film, I think.
Hey, well, on the rewatch, just before we're going to chat about this, it struck me that I think this might have gone into my current top 10, which it's a pointless thing for me to have a top 10 because I lie to myself about it, never mind anybody else. And, it's constantly changing, but there's some things I know are always in there. And, and very rarely it's anything brand new, even though I like new films. But on the rewatch, I just thought this is a magnificent film. It's just, um, and I think one of the great things I like about it's like any possible argument people might give you about modern films, such as um, everything is just lacking imagination and it's nothing new. And you think, well, look at that. That is you do a prequel to a film like X and have a load of that. That's completely different, whilst just fitting in so well and exploring a lot of the same themes. Argue against that. And I hear all these people saying, well, we want something different. And then when something different comes along, that no, not like that. It's like they argue against it. Pearl is different, and it's a poke in the eye for anybody who suggests that making a horror film lacks any sort of art. I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about the phrase elevated horror anyway, but I suppose if anything deserves it,
It's
Pearl
just
deserves
fucking
it.
horror.
It is, isn't it? I hate the phrase, but there you go. It's horror, but what a lot of people who don't like horror seem to miss is just how much it can say and the wonderful ways it can do it.
But I mean, again, said this a lot, but one of the reasons obviously there is the aesthetic and there's the
Mm,
creep and the uncanny feel of horror, which has always attracted me as a kid growing up, and it's what attracts me now as an adult, and I like all of that stuff. But for me, horror, and I think this is where the 21st century, I mean, I'm not saying there weren't subversive films of the 20th century. Of course there were, brilliant stuff. But I think in some ways we are a more open society in many ways. We can talk about stuff, things come to the surface. And I think horror is a brilliant medium for talking about
yeah,
those things. And anybody that kind of says that horror has nothing to say, I don't get it.
no,
I've been having arguments this weekend about Nosferatu. That film is, whatever you want to think about that film, that film's got something to say about the
yeah,
society we're living in now. And I
yeah,
think I'm not saying films have to do that. I'll happily take on style over substance, if the style is very good. But I think that horror films are very good at addressing stuff that no one else really wants to tackle in a
yeah,
way. And I think that something like The Substance, for instance, which is not going to please everybody. I really liked it, but you can't tell me that the film's got nothing to say. And then the other argument against it is things like, well, it's not very subtle, is it? I thought, look where we are as a society. We're beyond subtle. We're beyond understated. We
Yeah,
need a fucking
yeah,
punch in the face. We've not learned these lessons. That's why we've got a film like The fucking
yeah,
Substance, because you're
yeah.
you're not adult enough to take on understated and subtle. You need a fucking punch.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, yes,
I don't think I
yeah.
got much sleep last night.
Yeah, but it, as I say, I've not seen Maxine, so I don't know. I presume it would not matter which order you saw these. I could be right, I could be wrong. But certainly with Pearl, it just, you really could see that without. I was just talking about it to a workmate of mine before I came to do this, because he was asking me what I was doing over the weekend, and so I'm going to be talking about Pearl. He'd never heard of it, so I was telling him roughly about the trilogy, and it's right. How do I go about watching those? And that. So I don't really think it matters. I don't think it matters whether you watch X first or Pearl first, because they work as standalone films. It's just you get more out of them once you've watched them both, really. Whether it be just, I think one thing that struck me on watching it this time was Pearl uh, astride the scarecrow, sort of echoing the image of the same actress uh, making a porn film
Yeah,
whilst
yeah.
Pearl watches, and it's just things like that that you won't watch that in a film and think, oh, that must be referencing something I've not seen. But if you've seen both, you just think, oh, wow, there's all these clever little connections between the two films.
It's incredibly clever in terms of just, I think, yeah, again, I think all three films of that trilogy have got something to say. Um, However, I think Pearl especially, but all three films are just really clever visually, and it's
Mm.
not. Um, it and there is a layering of imagery which is really interesting. Like you said, I think it's those three films are a perfect example of three films you could watch back to back because there's so
Yeah.
much interplay between them visually. But if you watch separately, you're not necessarily aware of, or you
Mm.
forget. But also in the way they reference other films. So in Maxine, you've got this layering of ideas. So you've got Kevin Bacon plays like a private detective. Now, obviously, Kevin Bacon was in Friday the 13th, but the character
Mm.
he's playing is very much a Jack Nicholson Chinatown. He looks exactly like China. There's even a scene where he gets his nose cut. So it's that, and obviously
Yeah.
Jack Nicholson was in The Shining. And then
Mm.
later on, we get Maxine is in a house. He comes to find Maxine, and you see Maxine staring out the house through a gap in the wall where it's been axed. So she's kind of so it's all these
Yeah.
layering these images
Yeah.
from Friday the 13th,
Yeah.
Psycho, or and it's not just like let's just do a nod or let's an homage. It's really cleverly thought out, and I think you get that in all of these films. I think that the reason Pearl stands out for me. Um, it's all to do with Mia Goth. I think that
Mm.
in X and Maxine, you could argue that yes, obviously, you know, Mia Goth is the main character in Maxine, but there is
Mm.
a kind of ensemble feel. I think
To act.
Pearl is all about Mia Goth. It's
Yeah.
just a brilliant character study of her and this breakdown of this character and this crumbling psyche. And obvious, we can talk about the end scene, but it's just such a powerful. I don't even I don't mean this in a patronizing way at all. I just in a kind of gobsmacked. I don't know how somebody, because she's not that old, how somebody can convey what she manages to convey in
Yeah,
Pearl as that
yeah.
character. That's a tough thing to do, and she's absolutely brilliant.
Well, I've seen her talking to camera about the whole process when they were making X, and then of course start off thinking about Pearl's past as a means of her getting into that character, and of course coming up with the whole concept of the prequel as they were going. And it was fascinating to hear her talk. And again, I'd love non-horror lovers to just be able to see her talking about how much thought went into the characterization and then the plotting of her life beforehand is just amazing stuff, and she is brilliant. You're right. It a character that is really so disturbing a lot of the time. It's remarkable when you think about it how sympathetic she often is. You know, I find even watching X, although I'm a bit weirded out by old Pearl, watching it at times, I kind of feel quite sorry for her. And perhaps then watching Pearl, realize why I felt so sorry for her, because it's coloured in a lot more, and you get a lot more idea of what she's been through, which I mean brings her to what she is at the end.
Yeah, so like you said, I mean, obviously they were I mean, this is like you said, it's like the scope of it. You know, you've got Ty West, you've got Mia Goth, um, and so when they're filming X, basically during that production,
Yeah,
starting to work on the character of Pearl and proposing this kind of story and this pretext for a prequel, if you like. And yeah, and I think, like you said, it's, because she was, not only the actor involved, the main actor, she was actually, co-writer as well. I think there is something, yeah, to fact that the fact that they would, it's impressive that they were doing it during production, in downtime in production, and they came up with something really incredible, I think. Um, but the fact, how much she stretches herself in that role, I think, as someone fairly young, and
yeah,
just to do something with Pearl, which I don't know if anybody was really expecting. I mean, obviously they talked about a prequel, but in terms of doing something like that, and all these kind of, visual nods to other films, but also, I mean, similar to what we were talking about earlier on. I mean, Pearl's a good example of a 21st century horror film, which it partly is kind of understated and subtle, but also it's got this over the top feel as well.
mm.
But it really mixes those two brilliantly, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's for so long. It's a drama. The killing doesn't start, not of people anyway. Doesn't start for quite a considerable amount of time. But there is constantly that ominous feeling that things aren't quite right, and um, it's always really quite a tense affair, as well as I say, as well as being you feel for it. It's tragic, and it is fairly tragic in the way that she's stuck on the farm, and it's not all going to work out magically as it does for Dorothy and Wizard of Oz. Uh, but at the same time, when we get to the killing, and it's fairly unforgivable. You can't be doing that to people. But there's such tragedy in the misunderstandings, and you can almost spot those sliding door moments when there could have been a different decision. Somebody could have said something differently to her, or she could have reacted in a positive way to something that somebody said or did. And it's just like so near yet so far. You can almost see at times the point where she could have moved off, and perhaps try to have a successful, normal, whatever that is, life. And it doesn't. She just misses it, and it's tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And that that's amazing. I mean, it's just so many emotions you can go through just watching it. You know, it's shocking, creepy. It's, you feel sad, feel distasteful sometimes. At some points, so much going on, and that's before, as you said earlier, you've got these moments when you can identify cheeky little nods to other films as well. It's so much going on, and yeah, she is brilliant. And you mentioned we don't even need to go to that final incredibly long hold on her as she just keeps smiling. Just it, that's immensely powerful. But the speech she has before that, where she's she's talking to Mitzi, but actually talking to Howard, her husband, who's away at war, and it's what amazing acting.
I think as well with obviously what's apparent with X Pearl and Maxine is that they are all these are films about cinema. It's
Yeah,
not there is this, not only Pearl's aspirations and Maxine's aspirations in the final film. It's Pearl is dripping with that. She's sneaking out to go to watch these kind of silent film presentations, and it's kind of a very different era. But it's just this she, like a lot of people did, that were kind of sucked into that. They saw the cinema as a possible escape, not just in terms of going to see a film, which was an escape in itself.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's what this film deals with, but also the idea of possibly becoming a star and using that to
yeah,
escape.
yeah,
This kind of these evacuees from sort of tiny little towns and shitty sort of farming
yeah,
places that
yeah,
would flock, turning up to Hollywood expecting them to be a kind of the new sensation or whatever. And I think that
yeah,
is, it's very much about that. But it's very, and obviously we start with X, which is the kind, the early 70s kind of very
mm,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre porn
mm,
exploitation stuff. This
yeah,
is where that dream ends up. If you watch Pearl and then you see
yeah,
this is
yeah,
where this dream ends up being mangled, and this is what you end up with.
yeah,
And Maxine, not, I don't want to spoil it or anything for you because you've not seen it, but I'll just say that
yeah,
key scene comes right at the end, and it's right underneath the Hollywood sign. If you want
mm,
any more indication that this film is a film about film,
yeah.
it's that really. And it's very meta. I don't want to overuse that term because I think it is, everybody uses it, but
No,
it is very meta in that way. And again, it's not just simply, oh, let's do a bit from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or let's do a bit from
no,
whatever happened to Baby Jane, or whatever.
yeah,
It's very cleverly done because, as I said, there's this layering of ideas and images. It's much more interesting than that. This is, anybody can chuck in, as we've seen with a lot of these shittier sort of later Marvel films or DC films or
yeah,
whatever, where they basically just chucking stuff in the trailer, just,
yeah,
oh, let's go and see this film because it's got a 10-minute cameo from Michael Keaton or whatever.
yeah,
Anybody can do that. There's nothing clever,
yeah,
interesting, or exciting about that, really. But I think what Ty West does with X Pearl and Maxine, particularly with Pearl, is taking these images and layering them. This is those images, and whatever you want to call them, homages or whatever, or this layering of
yeah,
images, they are, I would argue, they are specifically for people that know their stuff. And
mm,
you can watch this without knowing your stuff. They are still very good
yeah,
films. But I think if you
yeah,
do know your stuff, it's kind of like, I think that's what he's throwing them in for, because you can see that, you can see how much effort has gone into it, and you could see the research, and you can see that he knows his stuff as well.
yeah, definitely. And of course, they have plenty to sort of be running away from. in the time it's set, well, with the war and the Spanish flu, and of course, he got the Great Depression coming up after that. Um, but it's almost zeitgeist stuff. It's just that the stuff they're working with there, and he's got the Spanish flu stuff going on, and of course, you've got lockdown going on. They're just lucky that they've got a film crew that've been working together for a long
Yeah, yeah,
time,
yeah.
so they're able to work together. Um, there's plenty today that we would want to be running away from, not just COVID, but all the madness and the war and everything that is modern life. And it's not just watching all of this in Pearl and thinking, well, this makes sense within that storyline within this past, but it's also it's pushing buttons and really referencing stuff that we're all experiencing as well in modern life, and everybody's always looking for that easy way of being lifted up out of it and something magical happening. And let's not forget that this is the era of the influencer, and the TikTok stars and all of this. Whichever way you look at the film, as you say, you could just watch it and it's just a horror film and it's great. But whichever way you look at it, whichever way you want to dig, there's something going on. There's something new to think about, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the thing with Pearl, the character. I mean, again, it's easy to do. I guess one of the things that is slightly wrong about 21st century horror, the stuff that gets it wrong, are those kind of just repackaged kind of same jump scares we've seen over and over again, or you're getting
Yeah,
these baddies that are just baddies and that's it, and there's
yeah,
no other dimension to them really. I think they're, few and far between, thankfully, and I think we've got some really good stuff to sort of quell that, because I think they went through a phase in the sort of early noughties where there was some American stuff that was just poor, really, and me as a horror fan was finding it very hard to defend.
yeah,
Um, However, I think with Pearl, you know, it's again that character is far more complex and far more interesting. That there is some real thought gone behind that, and there is some real pain behind it. And I think that even though we can't necessarily say that we empathize with her at the end, she is
mm,
quite clearly troubled character. But there is sympathy, I think, at the beginning of the film, and even the horrible audition she has to do, and she's
yeah,
not back, and it doesn't necessarily this is not someone who is gone for an audition and who is not necessarily very good, and just it's not like an X Factor thing where you get somebody who's clearly appalling turning up and expecting to be famous
mm,
without putting the work in. Here's someone's put the work in, and I think that kind of war cry, that breakdown she has, it's not a
yeah,
spoiled thing. It's just you can see the anguish. It's just
yeah,
why have I got to stay here when you're getting picked to do this and you don't actually you don't need it, you don't want it, not as much as I need this. And it's really heartbreaking because everybody's had a version of that in their lives.
yeah. And because they say to her, we're looking for something different, and you think you couldn't get much more different than this girl here. But yeah, yeah, it's very raw.
Yeah,
That
that is
that is the
again that is absolutely, I would argue, that is Ty West,
yeah,
and that is him again talking about the Hollywood system, and it's not, that this is just a simple audition, but that is just talking about
yeah,
the wider system and the wide, what, not necessarily what was happening then in film, but what's happening now. I think, and it's an attack on that. It's this like you've seen. I would argue that, Robert Eggers has he's delivered what he said he was going to deliver. You know,
Mm.
I really like Nosferatu. I'm not going to get
Yep.
into it because we're going into it next episode,
No,
folks.
no.
So I'll keep my powder dry. But it is, but you know, what is he met with? You know, fanboys saying, "Well, it's not the same as the
Yeah.
1922 version."
Yeah.
That wasn't the deal to me. Just watch the
No,
22
no.
version then. And I think that exchange is kind of like, you know, Hollywood, the producers or these kind of 20-year-old producers or whatever will be constantly saying we want something different. No, they don't. They want exactly the
Yeah.
same thing over and over again. And I think that's the slap in the face that Pearl gets, and that's what she's rallying against, and that's what
Yeah.
we should be rallying against. And it's a really interesting scene, I think.
100%. And the whole thing then with her being supported by Mitzi, who actually probably, if you knew her in real life, would probably be supremely irritating. But at heart, doesn't seem to be a bad old sort, really. And that's one of those elements of tragedy in that she meets her end through trying to be helpful. But then it's all of that Pearl thinking, well, I've not got this, and you have, because people like you always get the part,
Yeah.
always get the success. And yeah, so I don't empathise with her, obviously being a multiple murderer and abuser of animals, but um, this it's such a real character. She is such a real character that even though you don't agree with things she does, and you look at it and think, well, I certainly wouldn't have done that. You understand how her life is sending her in that direction, really. And again, goes back to that doing X and already just exploring the background, the history of that character, which is phenomenal. I think I'm going to watch those. There's a couple of interviews that are extras on the copy of the Blu-ray I've got. I think I'll be watching those as much as I actually watch Pearl again, because it's fascinating to hear them talk, both West and Goth. Brilliant. And by the way, talking of Goth, I mean the amount that people seem to lament there being no proper horror stars anymore, and they think, well, there she is. You know,
Because again, I think people have got this idea that a horror star has to be in the fold of a 20th century classic horror star. Everybody's looking for a new Karloff or Lon Chaney or whatever, and that's not gonna happen. That's not what you. That's not it. You're not understanding it, and
yeah,
it's not just about putting a mask on anymore. It's not about makeup. It's something deeper than that, and that's what. But essentially, that's what Lon Chaney understood. You know, I think
mm,
to reduce Lon Chaney down to just being makeup and effects is to misunderstand what he was as an actor. And I would argue
yeah,
the same with Karloff as well. You know, nobody's telling me that Karloff wasn't an incredible actor when you
mm,
see the 1931 version of Frankenstein. You know, his for
yeah,
you know a non-talking role. That's a man who is at the top of his game. You know,
tremendous.
incredible. So yeah. Why? Are we not making more of a thing of Mia? I mean, some people are, but like you say, it's like people are kind of missing the point in a way. You want something that's so solid and real that it's genuinely disturbing. Then you've got Mia Goth as Pearl.
Mm,
It's just
mm.
incredible.
Something she said watching the interview as well, and didn't strike me on first watch, although it absolutely should have done, and that's talking about the projectionist
Yeah.
and the fact that she likes the idea that he might not actually be there, which which I think is wonderful. And I did get that on the second view, and I absolutely did. But yeah, the idea that he is a projection of what's going on in her head, it's great. And all from the new Superman as well. I hadn't realised he was the new Superman,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
first time.
Which, you know, kind of makes sense in a way, even though wouldn't know at the time, and he probably didn't know at the time. But yeah, it kind of makes sense that he is the new Superman, given the
Yeah.
world which he's inhabiting in Pearl. And like you said, there are all these kind of allusions to other, not just horror films, but obviously these Wizard of Oz kind of
Mm.
inspire. She doesn't necessarily skip down the yellow brick road with this scarecrow, but she shags him instead.
Yeah, that's a different
Which is
version of the Wizard of
possibly
Oz.
what Dorothy wanted to do as well. I don't know. So I've
Yeah,
heard.
they
Um,
should have done a sequel. Yeah. Um, yeah, and of course, if you are in the know and you do watch a lot of films, you got stuff like you're looking at the gator and thinking, oh, a bit of eaten alive there,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and, and
The whole
just the
Crystal
whole.
Lake feel as well, and
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The lake,
yeah,
which either reminds me of Friday the 13th or Camille Keaton in the boat and I Spit on Your Grave and stuff like that. And it is wonderful that it doesn't feel forced. I don't think there's any time, and I think any of it feels like, here's Ty West earnestly trying to do clever things. It just feels so natural.
yeah.
It's
I think
everything.
if someone's trying to be clever, it can work sometimes. It can cannot it can hit sometimes. But I think this film is clever, but it's not about someone trying to be clever. It's just someone
Mm,
who knows what they're talking about, knows the
mm,
film that they want to make, and they're making it regardless of anybody else wanting it to be made. And I think that's what we get. And I think it's a shame that I'm not saying these films haven't been fairly successful for what
mm,
they are. They're
mm,
never going to be huge, massive blockbusters. Who would want that?
mm,
But they are really. I mean, Pearl especially. It's beautifully done. It's really interesting. It's very different. It's shocking. It's disturbing. It's
mm,
heartbreaking. All of this
mm,
stuff. And I just think it's a shame that what a lot of horror fans want um, is just another rehash of Friday the 13th or
mm,
Halloween, as if
mm.
anything new can be done with that at all. I get nostalgia and I get people maybe wanting this or that, but can we, as I say, is anybody if honestly, if you, with all your prejudice put aside, can anybody actually say, if you watch this back to back with the last Halloween film, can anybody honestly say the Halloween film's better? And if you do, you're a fucking liar because it's just fucking not.
You're right. You're right. And I must admit, funnily enough, the Halloween franchise, the whole lot of it, for better or for worse, is probably the one I have most of a fondness for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whilst accepting that there's a lot that's very much not right with some of the films in that series, but yeah, it's not the same experience. It's not as good in any way, shape, or form. A lot of those, you're quite right. And
Because I
I
think
mean,
the last thing we need, to me, as a horror fan, the last thing you need, I mean, I think this sounds really pretentious now, but I think the problem is with a lot of horror fanboys, and it usually is boys, I have to say,
yes, it's
it's
yes, it is.
it's that they they kind of want the same thing over and over again, and it's just that, and that's what you want,
Yeah.
but actually, the stuff that you're still nostalgic about, this was made by people that were giving you what you need. That's why
Mm,
you're still nostalgic about them because they did a brilliant job at that time. But just
yep.
trying to rehash that over and over again is not
Doesn't
really
work.
going to bring you any pleasure. The Pearl is a film that you need.
Yeah.
Midsummer. That I'm not saying everybody's going to like that, but that did something that really it punched you in the face because it gave you something that you needed. You needed to
Yeah.
feel that
Yeah.
level of discomfort. And this is, horror films to me should never be yeah, we've all got our nostalgic favorites and all that, but horror films should never really be about feeling comfortable. You shouldn't feel
No.
comfortable with a horror film. The moment you start feeling comfortable, then it's lost its power and its potential. You need to move on, keep view your old favorites, but you need to keep moving on and seeing
Yeah.
and witnessing and
Well,
taking in other things.
that is the problem. I mean, I think these people that you're talking about, they watch new things, and what they really want is the way they felt when they were, what, 10 years old, and
Everybody
saw something.
wants that, but
Yeah,
it's
you can't get that, can you?
can't
You
get it.
can't.
It's like fucking,
Um,
it's like trying, I don't have kids, so I like Christmas, but it's kind of like it's largely fairly redundant for me. It stopped being, stopped the meaning of it, I lost the meaning of it somewhere about 12,
yeah,
So, and I'd
there's
love to recapture that. I'd love to have every year, I would fucking love to have the Christmas I had when I was 7. It's not going to
yeah,
fucking happen though.
yeah.
No matter
Well,
how much I try and recreate that, much to everybody else's pain, it's not going to fucking happen.
there's very few films that you can keep watching um, over the decades, and it still makes you feel the same way it did at the time. I'm not saying that occasionally. I mean, the original Black Christmas still
Yeah.
unsettles
Yeah,
me
yeah,
whenever I
yeah,
watch
yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's still kind of doing its job in that respect. But as much as I love the Hammer films, the enjoyment I get now, the admiration I feel when I watch them, it's a different thing. They're different emotions to what I was experiencing when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and they don't get that. Whether you're talking about Doctor Who or Mark Gatiss's Ghost Stories of Christmas or whatever, and that's not about whether they're good, bad, I like them or don't like them. It's just the fact that people want what they can't have,
Yeah.
and somehow just can't get their heads around that they can't have it. You
And
know?
also, none of this stuff is going away. It's there, and you can give it a rest for a bit and check something else out that's new and that you're not,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like with Mark Gatiss, like you said, he does a really good job on the
I
Christmas
think
tree.
so.
I
I do
really
think.
do. I honestly do. Is he ever going to be able to capture that feel of those 1970s grainy on film? Of course not. But that it was just, he can't recreate that. He can only do what he can do. And no, it's
Well,
not going to be the same feel as those that you got weirded out by watching them the first time. But he still does something really good, and I think for him to constantly be criticized for that is just it's really short-sighted. He is doing something we should be fucking on our hands and knees that he is
yeah.
doing it, you
And
know.
do you know what? I asked him when I met him in October, just gone, what he felt about this kind of fan. And all right, he's a sensible man. He's a
Yeah, of
professional. He's not going
course.
to sort of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
alienate a whole bunch of people any more than already feel alienated. But his response was so level-headed and understanding. He just, for my money, he gave them a very easy ride. He just acknowledged their feelings and just, but he's going at something with enthusiasm. He's going at something with knowledge and experience. And again, brings us back to Ty West as a man who knows his stuff and is doing something that's of the time. I think another issue with fans like this that bemoan stuff is that they don't get that we're not the majority.
Yeah.
Oh, you should do Hammer films like it should be period gothics. That'd be brilliant. That'd be a massive success. And you think, would it?
No.
And it
What
wouldn't.
what studios could what who's going to invest in that? As
Yeah,
much as I would love to see any, more stuff by
yeah,
Hammer. Who's going to invest in it?
yeah.
That's where we're at. I don't want to fucking
Yeah, you and me
reduce
both.
the money, but you
But
need money to do this shit, you know.
yeah,
The Hammer that the Hammer of those classic Hammer horror films, as you and I know, they were a production line. when it's a time where you could have a British studio which was a production line. And by production line, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that they were
No,
very
no.
efficient at creating good, interesting, gory films for the era. That's not going to happen anymore. You know, you've only got to see, you've only got to go and watch a film, any independent film, and the first 10 minutes you're sitting through endless production companies because
Yeah,
they've probably taken 7 years to get the funding together.
yeah,
That, you know, so you have to work with the world that you're in. And, you know, Mark Gatiss is very lucky, I guess, in obviously he's worked his way up, but he's
mhm,
lucky in that he gets, you know, he has, uh, you know, I'm just happy that Mark Gatiss is doing these ghost stories for Christmas.
yeah,
And I'm just kind of genuinely not jealous. I don't wish to take anything away from him because I just think, what a fucking guy. You know, he does
yeah,
the
yeah,
ghost stories for Christmas. He got to write Sherlock. You know, I saw him a couple of years ago doing A Christmas Carol where
yeah.
he played
That's right.
Marley.
Yeah,
You know, he does all this. He got to do the Man in Black on the radio. I
yeah.
mean, what a fucking.
I did.
That's not even counting League of
No,
Gentlemen and stuff like that. I mean, what a brilliant fucking, you know, good on you, Mark, I say.
yeah. Well,
Good on you.
I asked him. I asked him at the Q&A in front of everybody in October. One question or another, and I did start off by just saying all the things he's done based upon stuff I love. I just said, Mark, I hope you understand that I love you and hate you in equal measure, mate. You know, and he seemed quite pleased with that, to be honest. But no, I mean, there is this misunderstanding from people about what can be expected, about where the audience is, what the audience is, and it's not always that easy. And I think going back to Ty West, I think the first film of his I saw was House of the Devil, which I thought was excellent, and just achieved this sort, for me, this sort of atmosphere, this mood. It conjured up a feeling in me that I recognised from when I was a lot younger watching a horror film.
That's the difference. That's
Yeah,
what I think is a skilled filmmaker because he's taking some of those you could argue as nostalgic elements, but he winds
yeah,
them in visually in a really clever way. It's like, you know, to me, um, in a similar way, it's like I'm going to go and see the new Bob Dylan biopic thing next
yeah.
week, and I really like Timothy Chalamet, and obviously I love Dylan, you know,
Mm,
but I'm really trepidatious about it. I'm hoping it's going to be really good, but what I don't want is like an arse-lick film. You know what I mean? I want it to
mm,
be warts and
yeah,
all, and I want something more interesting, and I want it to be in the style of Dylan, because I think
yeah,
if they don't do that, then because I think sometimes the most interesting films about real people are when it's not about telling the truth or the facts. It's about
mm,
presenting you with a greater truth, which is presented within the style of that person's art or imagery. So I
mm,
think in some ways a better interpretation of sort of Dylan or something like that or a character like that is to kind of work round him, you know, because you can never really understand who he is, I don't think. So it's almost like
mm,
working around him. So the film they did a few years ago where they had different actors playing different versions of Dylan, I thought that was more
yeah,
interesting. And the
yeah,
Coen brothers film Inside Llewellyn Davis or whatever, that was a really interesting because it's almost like Dylan's on the periphery, you know, and it's kind of
mm,
and I think what Ty West does to get back, it's not about, you know, it's like I said earlier, it's easy or it's wrong-headed, I think, to do another Friday the 13th sequel, but you can
yeah,
pay tribute to it in an
yeah,
original film by doing
yeah,
something interesting with the visuals and letting people know that you understand this
mm,
medium, even if other people don't, you know,
mm.
it's much more clever and interesting to do that because he's making a Ty West film,
That's right.
not a rehash. Who fucking cares? You made the last Halloween film? No, I don't fucking know. I don't care.
Yeah. But that,
Because
I
it's a
mean,
brand that's being pushed, not a
yeah,
director's film.
yeah, and you're right there. A Thai West film is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing, and you kind of you know what you're getting into there. And I suppose for a while it kind of don't know. It looked like he might have been lost that he wasn't going to be able to stick because I mean, well, I suppose Cabin Fever 2, it doesn't look like you'd be able to kick on and do your own thing quite as much as you would like. But he's taken the opportunities he's got and he's really built something you know exactly how you're going to feel. I think not necessarily you might like the film or not, but you know how you're going to feel through a Thai West film. You know what sort of boxes it's going to tick, and yeah, I think he's certainly one of my favourite directors of the modern age, really. In fact, I mean, yeah, stuff the critics. I think I am just going to start going and watching watching the when they come out on the big screen right away in the future.
Well, I have to say, use it or lose it. I honestly think, we're going to start losing cinemas up and down the country.
Well, yeah,
Unfortunately.
funnily enough, yeah, local to me. I was born in Leigh, Lancashire. Cineworld is closing down, but in an old mill, maybe a mile away from that, there's an independent cinema been opened within the mill using materials from the mill to build it. It's on the fourth floor. It's a bloody long walk up. You could try the lift, but it doesn't look safe. And it's an amazing experience. And that's all grown from a bunch of people who it was a hobby, just getting in some rented hall and projecting something on a wall or something, and there they are now. And I've introduced a couple of double bills the last couple of Halloweens. It was a Hammer Dracula one the first time, Universal Frankenstein's the second time, and I think you mentioned before going to an independent cinema. It's a different feel,
Yeah.
and it's a better feel because you feel that everybody who's going cares. So it's great to go somewhere like that. And again, someone like Wes, that's the filmmaker who cares. Someone like Mia Goth, that's an actress who cares. And I mean, the three of them all together couldn't be better. So, yeah, who cares about Cineworld?
Well, it just remains for me to say thank you to my guest, Ian Taylor, for coming on. Thanks, Ian. It's been a real blast. Really enjoyed that. Hope you'll come on again.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
Great. So remember to call round next time. Make yourself at home. You look like you're dying for a nice cup of tea for terror.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.